I. The order of rank. 1. The doctrine of the order of rank. 854. In this age of universal suffrage, in which everybody is allowed to sit in judgment upon everything and everybody, I feel compelled to re-establish the order of rank. 855. Quanta of power alone determine rank and distinguish rank, nothing else does. 856. The will to power. How must those men be constituted who would undertake this transvaluation? The order of rank is the order of power. War and danger are the prerequisites which allow of a rank maintaining its conditions. The prodigious example, man in nature, the weakest and shrewdest creature making himself master, and putting a yoke upon all less intelligent forces. 857. I distinguish between the type which represents ascending life and that which represents decay, decomposition, and weakness. Ought one to suppose that the question of rank between these two types can be at all doubtful? 858. The modicum of power which you represent decides your rank, all the rest is cowardice. 859. The advantages of standing detached from one's age, detached from the two movements, that of individualism and that of collectivist morality, for even the first does not recognize the order of rank, and would give one individual the same freedom as another. My thoughts are not concerned with the degree of freedom which should be granted to the one or to the other or to all, but with the degree of power which the one or the other should exercise over his neighbor or over all, and more especially with the question to what extent a sacrifice of freedom, or even enslavement, may afford the basis for the cultivation of a superior type. In plain words, how could one sacrifice the development of mankind in order to assist a higher species than man to come into being? 860. Concerning rank. The terrible consequences of equality. In the end, everybody thinks he has the right to every problem. All order of rank has vanished. 861. It is necessary for higher men to declare war upon the masses. In all directions, mediocre people are joining hands in order to make themselves masters. Everything that pampers, that softens, and that brings the people or woman to the front, operates in favor of universal suffrage, that is to say, the dominion of inferior men. But we must make reprisals, and draw the whole state of affairs, which commenced in Europe with Christianity, to the light of day and to judgment. 862. A teaching is needed which is strong enough to work in a disciplinary manner. It should operate in such a way as to strengthen the strong and to paralyze and smash up the world weary. The annihilation of declining races. The decay of Europe. The annihilation of slave-tainted valuations. The dominion of the world as a means to the rearing of a higher type. The annihilation of the humbug which is called morality, Christianity as a hysterical kind of honesty in this regard, Augustine, Bunyan. The annihilation of universal suffrage, that is to say, that system by means of which the lowest natures prescribe themselves as a law for higher natures. The annihilation of mediocrity and its prevalence. The one-sided, the individual's, people's, constitutional plenitude should be aimed at by means of the coupling of opposites. To this end race combinations should be tried. The new kind of courage, no a priori truths, those who were accustomed to believe in something sought such truths, but free submission to a ruling thought, which has its time, for instance, time conceived as the quality of space, etc. 2. The strong and the weak. 863. The notion, strong and weak man, resolves itself into this, that in the first place much strength is inherited, the man is a total sum, in the other, not yet enough, inadequate inheritance, subdivision of the inherited qualities.
Weakness may be a starting phenomenon, not yet enough, or a final phenomenon, no more.
The determining point is there where great strength is present, or where a great amount of strength can be discharged. The mass, as the sum total of the weak, reacts slowly. It defends itself against much for which it is too weak, against that for which it has no use. It never creates, it never takes a step forward. This is opposed to the theory which denies the strong individual and would maintain that the masses do everything. The difference is similar to that which obtains between separated generations. 4 or even 5 generations may lie between the masses and him who is the moving spirit. It is a chronological difference. The values of the weak are in the van, because the strong have adopted them in order to lead with them.
864.
Why the weak triumph. On the whole, the sick and the weak have more sympathy and are more humane. The sick and the weak have more intellect, and are more changeable, more variegated, more entertaining, more malicious. The sick alone invented malice. A morbid precocity is often to be observed among rickety, scrophulatic, and tuberculous people. Esprit, the property of older races, Jews, Frenchmen, Chinese. The anti-Semites do not forgive the Jews for having both intellect and money. Anti-Semites, another name for bungled and botched. The sick and the weak have always had fascination on their side. They are more interesting than the healthy, the fool and the saint, the two most interesting kinds of men. Closely related thereto is the genius. The great adventurers and criminals and all great men, the most healthy in particular, have always been sick at certain periods of their lives. Great disturbances of the emotions, the passion for power, love, revenge, are all accompanied by very profound perturbations. And, as for decadence, every man who does not die prematurely manifests it in almost every respect. He therefore knows from experience the instincts which belong to it. For half his life nearly every man is decadent.
And finally, woman.
One half of mankind is weak, chronically sick, changeable. Shifty woman requires strength in order to cleave to it. She also requires a religion of the weak which glorifies weakness, love, and modesty as divine, or, better still, she makes the strong weak. She rules when she succeeds in overcoming the strong. Woman has always conspired with decadent types, the priests, for instance, against the mighty, against the strong, against men. Women avail themselves of children for the cult of piety, pity, and love. The mother stands as the symbol of convincing altruism. Finally, the increase of civilization with its necessary correlatives, the increase of morbid elements, of the neurotic and psychiatric and of the criminal. A sort of intermediary species arises, the artist. He is distinct from those who are criminals as the result of weak wills and of the fear of society, although they may not yet be ripe for the asylum, but he has antennas which grope inquisitively into both spheres, this specific plant of culture, the modern artist, painter, musician, and, above all, novelist, who designates his particular kind of attitude with the very indefinite word naturalism. Lunatics, criminals, and realists, 1, are on the increase. This is the sign of a growing culture plunging forward at headlong speed, that is to say, its excrement, its refuse, the rubbish that is shot from it every day, is beginning to acquire more importance. The retrogressive movement keeps pace with the advance. Finally, the social mishmash, which is the result of revolution, of the establishment of equal rights, and of the superstition, the equality of men. Thus the possessors of the instincts of decline, of resentment, of discontent, of the lust of destruction, of anarchy and nihilism, as also the instincts of slavery, of cowardice, of craftiness, and of rascality, which are inherent among those classes of society which have long been suppressed, are beginning to get infused into the blood of all ranks. 2 or 3 generations later, the race can no longer be recognized. Everything has become mob. And thus there results a collective instinct against selection, against every kind of privilege, and this instinct operates with such power, certainty, hardness, and cruelty that, as a matter of fact, in the end, even the privileged classes have to submit. All those who still wish to hold on to power flatter the mob, work with the mob, and must have the mob on their side. The geniuses above all. The latter become the heralds of those feelings with which the mob can be inspired, the expression of pity, of honor, even for all that suffers, all that is low and despised, and has lived under persecution, becomes predominant. Types: Victor Hugo, Richard Wagner. The rise of the mob signifies once more the rise of old values. In the case of such an extreme movement, both in tempo and in means, as characterizes our civilization, man's ballast is shifted. Those men whose worth is greatest, and whose mission, as it were, is to compensate for the very great danger of such a morbid movement, such men become dawdlers par excellence. They are slow to accept anything, and are tenacious. They are creatures that are relatively lasting in the midst of this vast mingling and changing of elements. In such circumstances, power is necessarily relegated to the mediocre. Mediocrity, as the trustee and bearer of the future, consolidates itself against the rule of the mob and of eccentricities, both of which are, in most cases, united. In this way, a new antagonist is evolved for exceptional men, or in certain cases, a new temptation. Provided that they do not adapt themselves to the mob, and stand up for what satisfies the instincts of the disinherited, they will find it necessary to be mediocre and sound. They know, mediocritas is also aurea, it alone has command of money and gold, of all that glitters. And, once more, old virtue in the whole superannuated world of ideals in general secures a gifted host of special pleaders. Result: mediocrity acquires intellect, wit, and genius, it becomes entertaining, and even seductive. Result: a high culture can only stand upon a broad basis, upon a strongly and soundly consolidated mediocrity. In its service and assisted by it, science and even art do their work. Science could not wish for a better state of affairs. In its essence, it belongs to a middle-class type of man. Among exceptions, it is out of place. There is not anything aristocratic and still less anything anarchic in its instincts. The power of the middle classes is then upheld by means of commerce, but, above all, by means of money dealing. The instinct of great financiers is opposed to everything extreme. On this account, the Jews are, for the present, the most conservative power in the threatening and insecure conditions of modern Europe. They can have no use either for revolutions, for socialism, or for militarism, if they would have power, and if they should need it, even over the revolutionary party. This is only the result of what I have already said, and it in no way contradicts it. Against other extreme movements, they may occasionally require to excite terror by showing how much power is in their hands. But their instinct itself is inveterately conservative and mediocre. Wherever power exists, they know how to become mighty, but the application of their power always takes the same direction. The polite term for mediocre, as is well known, is the word liberal. Reflection. It is all nonsense to suppose that this general conquest of values is anti-biological. In order to explain it, we ought to try and show that it is the result of a certain interest of life to maintain the type man, even by means of this method which leads to the prevalence of the weak and the physiologically botched. If things were otherwise, might men not cease to exist? Problem. The enhancement of the type may prove fatal to the maintenance of the species. Why, the experience of history shows that strong races decimate each other mutually, by means of war, lust for power, and venturousness. The strong emotions, wastefulness, strength is no longer capitalized, disturbed mental systems arise from excessive tension, their existence is a costly affair. In short, they persistently give rise to friction between themselves, periods of profound slackness and torpidity intervene, all great ages have to be paid for. The strong are, after all, weaker, less willful, and more absurd than the average weak ones. They are squandering races. Permanence, in itself, can have no value. That which ought to be preferred thereto would be a shorter life for the species, but a life richer in creations. It would remain to be proved that, even as things are, a richer sum of creations is attained than in the case of the shorter existence, i.e., that man, as a storehouse of power, attains to a much higher degree of dominion over things under the conditions which have existed hitherto. We are here face to face with a problem of economics.